been something I've carried into studying. My wife, she used to say, well, I said, I'm going to go look at a gig. I heard a guy, well, what do you want with another gig? I said, I tell her I just need one more.
My name's Deb Bailey, and I am the folk arts specialist at the Missouri Folk Arts Program, and I coordinate the Traditional Arts Apprenticeship Program. And this is Lisa Higgins, who is the director of the Missouri Folk Arts Program, and I'd like to introduce you to two wonderful people. Ray Hastings from Doniphan, Missouri, way down in the Ozarks, kind of the Ozark Riverways region. And Mr. Keith Whitehead, who's really Whiteside. We were talking about that last night. That's why I got it in my head. Whiteside, and he is from Gatewood, Missouri, which is just really down the road, not that far from Doniphan at all. Smaller community. And this year, I just would say that Ray Joe Hastings, who definitely has been a past master in this program, is a master in gigmaking again, and Keith happens to be his apprentice. And they've been doing quite well and I think enjoying themselves while they've been learning together. And Keith he started out really, started making knives all on his own. He just kind of went out there, got a forge, and just started doing it. And then, but he had enough skill. You have to have about intermediate skill. He had enough skill to get into this program. And I think it's safe to say that gigging has been an important part of both of their lives. So, we're going to talk a little bit. Now, of course, I just want to give you an overall schedule. We're going to do this for about 30 minutes or so. We're going to talk. And we want to leave enough time for a few questions if people have them. And then we're going to walk over and see the painting, the actual painting, part of the Missouri Nostalgia exhibit on which this talk is based originally. Because no one knows more, well, you too, you grew up in that area too, but no one knows more about kind of gigs, the history of gigging, the technology that was used on the boats. Because to my utter surprise, they already had gas motors down there in 1902. And that was something new I learned today. I'm just going to ask them a few questions and let them go from there. And we are going to get a chance to see that painting at the end, so you can, it's a visual of people gigging off, the current river actually, in 1947. And this was part of a series of paintings that was done by, what company was it? I can't remember, but it was a big, gorgeous, one of those really top-flight department stores in St. Louis at one time. Barney?
Scruggs-Vandervoort-Barney.
Yes. And they ended up, and they commissioned at some point a bunch of artists to go out and document life in Missouri. And that's why it's called Missouri Nostalgia. And this particular painting is by Howard Baer. And these painters didn't necessarily come from Missouri. They came from all over. And they explored different areas. A lot of them are rural, not all of them. Some of them are urban. They're really fascinating. And when you have a chance sometime, you can come back and see the whole exhibit. That's just one painting of a number that are up. We don't have them out there that often for preservation reasons. They're watercolors basically on paper, so they have to be protected. We ended up with the collection some years ago after that store closed for preservation purposes. We're glad to have it. So we're gonna just go ahead. Oh, well, he was Ray's been a master art 4 times already. And one of the things I wanted to know, though, before we even start, does everybody know what gigs are and what gigging is? It's okay. Do you? Okay, I'm serious because not everybody does. Because
Barney knows.
yeah. So I just want to make sure, because you'd be surprised how many people don't know or automatically think of frog gigging, which is kind of big in my area, the Midwest where I grew up. Now, Ray Joe, I know you grew up near the current river, and I was just curious about, did you gig as a young person in your family?
I did, but my gigging started out, if you'd hand me that bow there, my gigging started out simpler. It started out as what we knew back then as bow gigging, or as some people call it, bow and spiking. This is the way when we got through, or carried them down the creek, we wrapped the bow and spike up, and we usually used baling wire on our bows, and we waded small creeks. We happened to live by a creek called Briar Creek, and we'd walk down before dark. You had to soak your bows because they made out of cedar and other breakable trees. Anything would do, just about. We lay in the water for about an hour and get preparing to go for gigging. So this is how we carried them back and forth. And when we got ready to gig, my dad would string the unwrap them and string the bow up, and it wouldn't break as long as you soaked it. Cedar is a good bow. You couldn't pull them back very far. You didn't pull them back like this. You held them crossways and pull them back like that, so far. And the light would hold the fish just like gigging on a big river does. And we killed a lot of panfish, hand size we're talking about. So that was the start of my gigging. And we'd walk several miles doing that kind of gigging, day and night. So you do it both ways. You could gig of a day and you could gig at night. So that kind of launched me into my gigging. And later on, I moved to the banks of the current river, and that got me started gigging for fish in the river, which is usually consisted of the game laws prevented you gigging game fish, suckers, carp, buffalo, any rough fish. And we did that for a lot of years. Gigs were made by local blacksmiths. If you had the knack for it and had a forge at home, you could make your own gigs. We didn't have that luxury. We didn't make our own gigs. We'd go to town and have one made. Dad would. So that's kind of the history of gigging with me as far as my gigging. But I'd like to say gigging goes back a long, long ways. I mean, it goes back into 1800 and early 1800s. In fact, it wasn't invented by the white man. The Indians actually used gigging as a method of taking fish by hand and by pole. They sharpened sticks. I'm sure there's no proof of it, but that was the forerunner of the white man picking up on gigging. So it goes back probably as far back as man was walking on earth. It's an easy way to get fish. And it continues this day down in our area. There's lots of lights out there on the river, people gigging fish. And the last time I went, we was doing it more for fun and eating up. We weren't trying to kill a boatload of fish. When we got enough to all we wanted to eat, we went to the bank, fried them up, and that ended our night. So that's pretty well it on fishing.
In your family, when you were really young growing up, were those fish important for, was it fun?
It was fun, and it was kind of a necessary. It wasn't easy times. I was born in 37, and helped put food on the table also. It was pretty rough times. I remember them ration stamps that you had to take to the grocery store to get certain food items, coffee, and other things. So you could have fun gigging, and then you could eat up your fun. You'd have a fish fry the next day. It was just part of living. It kept you. If you had a few dimes in your pocket, you could keep them. You could kill in the woods, squirrel hunt. There wasn't many deer when I was growing up. They'd been just about pinned out where there wasn't many. But the woods and the water kept us from having to spend what few quarters that we had. I remember Dad, if I get it on that subject, he made ties, and he got a dime a piece for his ties, and he'd make 10 a day, walking to the woods and walking back, and he'd make $1 a day. Just think about that, folks, compared to today, $1 a day.
Are you talking about railroad ties?
Mm-hmm. They
Okay.
could hew out with a broad axe 10 ties a day, and he made a big old $1.
No electric saws, huh?
No, it was just all axe and broad axe. That's how he made them.
And Keith, you grew up with some digging activities as well?
Yeah, we grew up on Current River, right there at Donovan with Ray Joe, and we didn't have to do it for the necessity. Thank goodness. We were able to just do it in fun, and it was a way of getting friends and family together, and the community still does it today. It starts in September, goes all the way through January, and they'll go out come dusk. They'll get out there and with their boats and the lights and gig for a couple hours. And like Ray Joe said, you go back to the banks, and you're not doing it for the necessity. You're doing it for the enjoyment of spending time with friends and family. So you don't kill a whole bunch to set up in your refrigerator or your freezer, but you'll go back to the bank and skin them up and clean them and fry them up right there on the bank and enjoy the company.
And fresh fish.
And fresh
A rare
fish.
commodity. And since Ray Joe and both of you, please kick in. Since you were talking about the boat gigging first, could you explain about gigging off a john boat or a flat bottom boat, that traditional to the area?
Well, the john boat was common when I was growing up. The flat bottom had disappeared. And the john boat was the mode of transportation back then with a small motor. They'd quit holding at the river by the time I come along. And the gigging line consisted, in my time, usually the Coleman lantern. The fire basket had that people used. That is a basket made out of steel straps so big around, pine knots dumped in it, and lead hang out over the boat. And people gigged with that light. They had abandoned that, and the Coleman lantern had come out. I don't know how early, but we was using one in the 40s. So they would put one of them on the front of the boat. And there was different lights, but that's what we used to hold my lantern. Somebody stood up on the front of the boat. We didn't have the big guardrail back then. And it was, once in a while you'd see somebody, you hit a bump, go overboard, and that cold water, it didn't take too long to get back in the boat, but that's how we gigged back then. And sometimes they would set a kerosene rig with a feeder, I don't know, it's kind of like kerosene can in the center, and it gravity fed out to through a pipe out over the boat, out over the water, and there's a holes drilled in a pipe out here, a larger pipe, and it gravity fed out to that, and that was lit, and it was packed with cotton and different things, and if a guy'd get on each side of it, the boat was floated down through the big holes sideways. You didn't, and guy on each side, you pick up a lot of fish like that, 2 giggers. So that was going on way back in there too, 50s and 60s. So it eventually it just kind of progressed into. Well, they got lights now that absolutely looks like the sun came up there so bright. They have got great lights.
I think, are they LED lights?
Some of them are, and one friend of mine got lights that they used for night lights off of one pole, lighting up the baseball field of the night. It's just off of one pole. It is absolutely amazing how bright them lights are. But most of them little lights now, the LED lights, I guess. I haven't kept up with it, but they're very bright.
Well, you go out there, like he said, as it evolves, you go from the basket to the kerosene to the Coleman, and then you got into where they used the generator, and they had the big lights out there, and now they've got to where they have the LED lights, and they don't have to have the generator, they just have a couple batteries out there, and that's charged up, and you don't have the big loud roar, but you know, I'm sure going with the kerosene, there's only so far you could see with that light. And 5-6 feet, I would say, was probably pretty good visual. And now they've got those lights, like you were saying, that light up a baseball field, and you can see pretty far into the water and all around. I guess the worst thing that you got to worry about is all the bugs that it attracts. Because it's so
I'm sure are numerous.
Yeah, the colder it gets, the better off you are as far as not having to worry about the bugs. But
Now the water's clear too.
the water is very, very clear.
Down there, yeah, it's
One
clear water,
time,
too.
we even doubled up on our cold ones. We put 2 up there in front, and they gave it a better light, but you were still, compared to the day's light, it wasn't, well, there wasn't any comparison. But you can see good clear water, cold water, yeah.
Keith, could you grab that? This is Randall, by the way.
Yeah,
I
this is
didn't
my
even
son,
know he
Randall.
was there. I just spotted him.
This isn't quite like what we use in the river. We use in the river, it's about twice this size. They're usually 15 to 20 feet long. And they keep this string on there so that if you drop it in the water, you keep it on your wrist. That way it don't float on down the river and get away from you. And it's got a...
And some people throw that
Yeah.
out the end of the
Yeah, they'll throw it, they'll keep that on their wrist, and if they see a fish out there where they can't get to it, they'll actually throw it like a spear into the water.
Oh, I didn't know
I actually went gigging with my uncle one time, and we were gigging, and he did that. Man, he gigged a big old buffalo, and we teased him, said, that was lucky. He said, oh, it is not. We're like, yeah, okay. Well, we got down the river about 15, 20 minutes later, and he did the exact same thing. So we had to eat our words on that. So he done good. But then they keep you keep it. Usually have a hole drilled in the side of your gig, and then you'll wire it to your pole. So that way, if your pole snaps, you don't lose your gig. It's screwed to your pole, so you're not losing your gig.
Yeah, in my collection of gigs, I have several that's been found in the river. There's lots of gigs lost in the river.
This little dude here, I made it for my son. We do a lot of canoeing down the smaller, not Current River,
11 Point.
down 11 Point and different things like that. We do a lot of fishing and floating down the rivers in our canoe. We've got a big old 18-foot grooming, and we can walk around in that pretty good, and he'll stand up in the
Yeah,
front
I'll
of it.
stand up on it and I'll cast my line and catch fish.
That's right. And so I made this for him so that when we're going down through there, now he can stand up there and gig at fish. That's his goal, is he wants to gig a fish off the front of the canoe. So we've got this.
Randall's learned how to make gigs too. He's found it
Yes.
on a few gigs.
He does. I've been taking him with me over there to Ray Joe's and I'll pull the hot steel out. And he'll have him a little stool sitting there, and I'll set the hot steel down and hold the chisel, and he'll have his little 2-pound hammer and gloves and safety glasses on, and people always say, because I've got a few videos of it, people always say, boy, you're awful brave, because he's swinging that hammer. But he knows what he's doing. He's good. He don't miss that. He don't miss that chisel. He's pretty good.
And which one did he help you make, Keith? There's one out here somewhere. Which one?
Yeah, that's it right
The
there.
middle one, yeah.
Yeah. You helped cut that out, didn't you? Yeah.
And, like I always notice, there are different sizes of gigs and different types of, can you talk a little bit about that? What you use for what and how they're made?
Yeah, well, of course, these up here are 1, 2, and 3, and 4 prong. You can either call them bow gigs or bow spikes. The 2-prong is actually the bow gig. For some reason, people refer to that as a bow gig. The rest of them are 1, 3, and 4 prong spikes. I don't know how that got started, but I traced it back to 1930 or so. And that 2-prong bow gig, it got stuck with that title. But what got me interested in collecting, I was down at Dr. James Price. I don't know if anybody's heard of him. He was stationed there, and he's got a doctor's degree in archaeology. And anyway, he's one smart guy, and he worked for the Riverway system in Van Buren for years there. And we've been friends for a long, long time. And I walked in his office one day, and he was running through some pictures, and he said, I was showing these to a guy one day, and he had a 2-prong bow gig there. And the guy said, whoa, back up, what's that? And I said, it's a 2-prong spike. And I looked at it, I said, you mean a bow gig, don't you? And we started discussing that, and he said, no, I mean a spike. That's what we always call them. And I said, we always call it a bow gig. And we talked it back and forth, and that, for some reason, just lit me up. And I started collecting. I had one of ours left at home. I still got it. It was a 2-prong. Really wore back because when my dad, that ended for us in the 50s, and for others 60s it kind of died out. For most people in the 60s it was gone. As few carried it on into the 80s, but by 1980s it was pretty well over with. And it's real blunt, where me and my brothers went down the creek, Briar Creek there where we lived, shooting crawdads with it. And Dad never resharpened it after that, after he quit. So it's really wore back. blunt hitting rocks. There were those streams down there, nothing but rock bottom. So that kind of launched me on my collecting career, and I started collecting them mainly. Then I got carried over into the big ones, and I went to Van Buren one day and seen where Paul Martin, he made a gig, and these two right here are Paul Martin's. And I seen a 4-prong there, and I said, who made that gig? Boy, it's beautiful. And hold it up for them to see. They can come by directly and see it. And they told me, said, a guy from Bunker made that all the way high. And I said, who was he? And they told me, Paul Martin. And I drove up there to see him. You can lay it back down now.
Wait a minute, I want to get a picture.
Oh,
Don't hold it in front of your face.
somebody in the back taking a picture too. Hold it up.
Hold it up so that
Hold it
person in
up.
the back can get it.
So, hold it square for him where you see it. You got it sideways.
Hold it up and make sure.
So,
You got it.
I drove up to Bunker and talked to him, and he was making the gigs that day. And I asked him if he'd make me a little 4-prong bow gig. And I don't know if he done it that day or when I started, but this 4-prong up here, I made all of these in this showcase. It looks quite a bit like one he made. That was 95 or 6. And that just kind of launched me on the big gigs then. And it's been something I've carried into still yet. My wife, she used to say, well, I said, I'm going to go look at a gig. I heard a guy, well, what do you want with another gig? I said, I tell her I just need one more.
And by the way, this man has a huge collection, and part of it is on display at the current River Heritage Museum in Doniphan. So if you're ever down that way, there's didn't Cecil Murray make that John boat in there? The wooden John boat that's in the museum? Maybe not.
I don't think he made that one.
Okay, there's a John boat in there, but other locally made items, including 2 really lovely now illegal cylinder wood fish traps that are actually, you find them more in the boot heel actually, but I didn't know they were in that area, but apparently at one time they were. They can get in, but they can't get out, the fish.
But you know, when I started collecting, I had absolutely no intention of ever making a gig. I just didn't. I'm talking with my hand, but I had no intention of making a gig. But when I went up there and talked to Paul Martin, my instructor, and he was good. He told me he made probably 2,000 or 3,000 gigs in the 20 years he'd make over 100 a year. And I just want to know how this made. And somehow or another, I got caught up in that too. And who was the girl that was?
Dana Everett Spain.
Dana, yeah. Somehow or another contacted her, and she said, well, you need to have him show you how to make one. And I said, well, I'm not really that much interested. But I was too, you know. So I talked to him, and he said, I'm not interested in teaching. And so she come down and contacted him and said, well, we pay you $1,500. There's $1,500 back
At
there
that
for
time,
teaching.
yeah.
And he said, thought about it. He said, well, I believe I'll do it. He's like me, you know, that's a lot of money to him. And that was 95, 96. He said, the only reason I'm doing this is to pay for my funeral. And he died in 2004. But I'm gonna give it to that man. He was one fine kid, and a fine old man. Well, I'm calling him old, I'm almost 82, but he was 6 or 8 years older than me, but he could make a pretty gig. All you gotta do is look at him here. And I'd like to think that mine looks a little bit like his.
And it does very much. And can you tell people, when you say pretty gig, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's just the eye appeal. A gig, what I wanted was eye appeal and durable. They gotta be durable too, but the eye appeal is something that that's what caught my attention with that. It's attractive, but yet it's durable. It's gotta have both qualities to me to be a good gig. It's gotta attract you like you just, I guess like my wife, I want to grab her when I first. You know, it's got to have an eye appeal and be durable. That's the only way I can put it. It's two qualities there, and that's what drew me to it.
And is part of that in the symmetry of it, and
Yeah.
the balance?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah. If you was to go over, I've seen you pick up Herb Ellerman's gig and look at that, and Paul Martin gig. They just look good.
They do, they look beautiful.
There's an herb.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other nut, they're about 4-prong.
This one.
Yeah, the 3-prong you just picked up, I seen that on sale bill, still have the sale bill. It said Ellerman gig, eminent, that's about 70 miles away from Donovan, 1995. I drove all the way from Donovan up there and bought the gig.
Right, this one's an open.
That's her.
Open hand.
Another guy wanted it real bad, but I wanted it work.
Oh, I was just gonna, there aren't too many people that can beat Ray Joe to a gig, but occasionally it does happen. And he's still getting that one more gig.
Yeah.
So, and did you want to talk about a little bit about, either of you kind of contribute a little bit about how you've got kind of, this over here is
The steps,
yeah, the steps, the process.
left to right, 1, 2, and a 3-prong.
Yep,
Uh,
starts with, yeah.
If you almost have to get close, but the top is a spike, and that's made out of a hay rake tooth. All these are hay rake tooths. You start with you just straighten it out, cut it in sections. And the first step is just a tooth. The second one is you make the point on it. Third, you cut the beards. Then you get the socket ready and roll it over, and you're finished there with it. And this is the backing to hold the sickle mower for the county road, where there's a sickle blade that cuts the grass. That's a strap, and it's that wide. Well, so you just cut this section out and split it up the middle on the first 2 holes there, and then you cut it off up there that's the hole up a little higher there. They surprised that made this bow, showed me that. And spread it out, cut your beard, make your points. Bring your points back down, your prongs. You beat your socket out, start rolling your socket over, and fold it up, and you got your bow gig. And there's your 3-prong, same process. You've got to, and this is kind of tricky, you got to bring these 2 outside prongs out to the side, get them out of the way to work the middle prong and to work the outside prongs. And you cut the beards on them, bring them back down. The trick is to get everything even. And when you get through, it's supposed to look like that. When you first start, they don't.
Hazel Price that made the bow. That's
Hazel
Dr.
Price made the bow.
And that's Dr. Price's
Yeah, I stopped the price of that. And what, 2011, I think it said on here. I had him sign it. What he did,
Yeah, he just passed away, didn't he, at like
Yeah.
age 99, yeah.
he's 99-year-old.
We just had his auction.
You did? Ooh, I would have liked to have been there. Yeah.
A lot of it he didn't sell through us. We sold a lot of it, but then a lot of it went to museums, and then some of it went to higher-end auction companies over in New York and
You know,
things of that nature.
this is a cedar bow, but it's got a lot of, you need to get down into the red, and there's a lot of white. We call it meat. There's white here, and you need to get the red of cedar like this. But you gotta soak them things before you string them. That was the first thing we learned. And Acel tried to string it, and he knew better without soaking it. You got to do that to get your, see how they look after they're strung. And he broke it. It's sticking out just like this. And I said, what are you going to do with that? He said, it ain't no good, I'll throw it away. So let me have it. So I soaked it for a day, got me some clamps, and brought this back around after soaking it, clamped it down. It's a good demonstration bow to show people. So there it is. And this, of all things, is telephone wire. That's not the regular wire. This should be baling wire. But he had an old phone line that will run through his farm. And this is the old time, early phone wires before they come out with phone wires. They set on poles, they nailed a tree and everything. That's the original old phone wire. Come through the counties, nailed to trees and everything.
It's kind of use what you have. And I know Ray Joe used to go to those junkyards and get those old springs from the
Yeah.
old cars.
Yeah.
That was very good spring steel for these.
Yeah.
So,
The pickup springs to make the river gigs is the best. Older the better. Buggy springs, if you can find some that aren't pitted, is real good. Seat springs or just buggy springs, they're real good. Sometimes I can find them.
Show your whole fork.
Oh, yeah.
here, Randall. I'll come back.
The most common gig that you can find, I dubbed it in my book. Hey, I'm pretty smart, I wrote a book.
Oh, gosh, we have to talk about the book, yeah.
And I tell people I'm pretty near a genius. Pretty near. This is a hoe socket. They come off a hoe in the garden. This is a pitchfork. Now, blacksmith had lots of work to do, and people wanted gigs. And so they figured out, well, I don't have time to make a gig because I only get $3 or $4 for one. So they cut the socket off the old wire hole. They took a pitchfork, straightened, the neck wasn't very long, and these different forks, but I picked this one. And all they had to do is bend these prongs over and forge weld them to each other and leave enough out for the beards, see the beards, and forge weld these together. You had to get them really, really almost white hot, and they used either 20 mule team borax if it wasn't available back then. They used sand for flux, put on that, forge weld them together. I've always said and believed that using this method, a good blacksmith could make one of these in 30 or 40 minutes, as opposed to hours of making a cutout gig. So that freed up his time. He could still get his $3 for whatever he charged at the time, and go on about his work, doing his wagon wheel fixing, whatever he had to do, sharpening plows, shares. So I thought it's pretty ingenious of taking these two, the hoe and pitchfork, marrying them together and making a gig. But they're very, very common. There's lots of them out there. And if you want to pass that around, Randall, you can see there where they're married together right there.
Can I ask your apprentice a question really quickly?
Oh, I want you to.
So Keith, you did quite well on your own learning how to make knives. I mean, I was really impressed, because he hadn't been doing it that long, and he really was trying to teach himself how to do it. He really didn't have a teacher available.
Yeah.
So how does the apprenticeship experience one-on-one kind of compare?
It's actually been pretty amazing, you know, because with my bladesmithing or making knives, it's just been, I've read several books and searching on the internet and trial by error and things of that nature. And I'd said to my wife that you know, I'd kind of like to learn how to make gigs, because, you know, we still gig in our area, and it's a lost art. You can't find forged gigs. So I knew Ray Joe done that, and I seen him at I think it was a pie auction.
Yeah.
And I went up to him and I showed him one of my knives, and it was like, you know, I'd really like to learn how to make gigs, forge gigs. And he said, would you really? Yeah. And I think he called me a few days later. I run into him, and he told me about this program and how he'd like to take me in, and if we could do this and teach me. And going and working with him there at his house has been, it's been really actually eye-opening, because it was a lot harder than what I thought it would be. I mean,
think they all say that.
It is. It's a very hard art, and being there and seeing him, just having his sight of being able to give me pointers and like, you know, if you try this or if you try that, or well, if you need to do it this way, and you see the little things that take a lot of time off of what if I hadn't had someone there to actually teach me little tricks of the trade, and as we talk about all the time, having the right tool makes a big difference. Holding a round bar of steel ain't very good with them flat tongs, you know.
That little old woman told me that trick. Well, I'm so embarrassed.
But actually, it has, and I've learned a ton of stuff, and getting my son over there and being around Ray Joe and learning lost art, it's been really enjoyable. And actually, we've talked, and I'm gonna still go over there and pester him and go hang out over in his shop for a few minutes.
We work Tuesday.
Yeah. I think actually I am going to speak up and say that I actually taught Ray Joe something, and it was on your anvil, when you're hammering on your anvil. I learned, actually we was doing a heritage event, and the guy had a magnet on the side of his anvil, and I said, why do you have that magnet on there? And he said, well, that slows the ring, it tones the ring down, you know, which I have a chain around mine, and that helps and things. And I was like, And I got home and I grabbed my magnet, and she had it in the center of his anvil. I stuck it underneath it and showed Ray Joe, and he's like, taught me something. I was like, puffed up chest a little bit.
Is there a Well, let me ask, does anybody have any questions for Ray Joe? Or Keith?
Yeah, could you expound a little bit on bow gigging? It seems to be a tradition that's kind of centralized just in central Missouri. And, you
Yeah.
don't see bow gigging traditions in other parts of the state that I've noticed.
It's just a few counties that I can find out about. It was, and Doc Price has even got on his magic machine. He can't find any locations where, other than down in our area, a few counties. I've got a count. I think about Arkansas and Missouri combined, maybe 15, 16 counties, and then it just kind of peters out. It just, no more. They may be a few that use them. I see no reason why coming over from Donovan, a few counties, say west of Oregon County, they wouldn't have used them. There's clear streams over in there, but it just seems to have stopped, just dead in its tracks after it reached a certain point. So about 15 counties, I think, is what I come up with, that I can't trace it any farther. I don't know why, but there's a few in Arkansas, adjoining Ripley County, and maybe one or two just below that, and several around and north of Ripley County, and well, east of Ripley County, after Poplar Bluff, you start running into lowlands. And so that would be self-explanatory there. The streams start getting dingy, muddy, when you run into sand country over there. But the rock strewn, the hill country there, I don't know why it wouldn't have went farther west and farther north, but.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's just kind of localized like that.
Yeah,
I had never heard of it, 10, 12 years ago when I met you.
Yeah, it's kind of a mysterious thing. There's a lot of streams out west. They might have used a different method. I know a guy sent me some information on, they had I can't really explain it, but they had a method where they jabbed fish with a stick, and when they impaled him, that string or something come off and stayed with the fish, and they kind of pulled him in like that. But it was, and a bow wasn't the only thing that they used to shoot the fish with. I have in my book, it tells about, and by the way, I'm not pressing anybody to buy one, I sell them, but they have, in my book, it explains this. There's a guy that I met, and I traded him out of a bean shooter like deal that he put, back then they had what we call red rubber, inner tubes, and this synthetic stuff now today wouldn't work. But he made a bean shooter between 42 and 48. You couldn't remember for sure, somewhere in there, 1942 and 48. And the forks are only about that long. And he's got a little V shape in the center where the arrow lay, that you shot the fish with, regular size gig and arrow, but it lay in that, and he shot it just like a bean shooter. You pulled it back and
If you're
shot
wondering
it.
what a bean shooter is, he's talking about a slingshot.
Well,
wondering what that was.
we call them bean shooters. I always thought of slingshot, like Brother David used, But anyway, you pulled it back. And then later, he had another one that he gave me, made just a little bit different, but it was the same thing. And then he made me one by hand and put his synthetic rubber on it, but he made me one with a pouch and everything. So I've got 2 old ones and a new one made on the same pattern as he made me give me. So I was very fortunate to get them. And some guys, a little glow donovan there, wound the inner 2 strips of rubber in their fingers and intertwined them like you would a rubber band shooting a paper wad, and shot fish like that.
Didn't Gene Brasher do something similar to that or something? You were telling me that one time. Is that Gene?
Don't implicate him in all this.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Well, he used to bowl growing
Oh,
up.
was it? Let's see this.
Why do you think bow gigging died out?
I think it was, I blame it on the modern times, the television and everything. Things just got better and new gadgets came along. That was kind of a sport. Later years, you know, it was a necessity early on, and it became less and less of a necessity. Money got more plentiful. We had more entertainment at home, so it was kind of a weekend deal, and everybody got through working. So instead of sitting around getting our bows, going down the creek for enjoyment, we sat around and watched television. Things just got better, and we had more things, other things to do.
And there's still people that go out and go bow fishing, but it's,
And it turned
it's
into
the-
bow fishing
yes,
instead of bow gigging.
right.
They do it now out of boats, but it's for sport, it's daytime. Oh, my book tells about it, but we used to have to cross a road, and coming up, we looked, and wasn't very many cars back in the 40s and 50s, but we listened, we looked, we get closer, we got to that road. You could see them way down the creek. More than once I've seen Dad cut that lantern off, douse it, and shut the light off, that car would come on by. It's illegal. Come on, man, I'm still scared to say that. When the car'd gone by, Dad light it back up, we'd hurry on across the road. We'd never caught it. So maybe it wasn't illegal. Huh?
Want to do this and then see the...
Yeah, and go see the painting? No, did you?
Yeah, so, do you mind?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no, please.
So, our assistant director made this beautiful poster and postcard that you all can take with you for today's event. And Matt Smith, our assistant preparator, you'll like this, he recycled some stuff. And he framed this for you. We want to give this to you to take home.
Mercy, mercy.
It's got some weight to it.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
And then we'd like to invite you all, Alyssa McCusker's here, she's the curator of Missouri Nostalgia, and we wanted to leave a little time if people wanted to look at the painting, and did you mind hanging out in there for a few minutes if people have questions?
Yeah, you can
And some
teach me.
people, yeah, teach you.
I figured the painting out now.
Yeah.
If you need me to explain.
Well, you can go over and explain it too, you can tell Alyssa all about it, so she,
There we go.
yeah,
Thank you, I appreciate
I'll
that.
hold that for you. But
Let me
we appreciate everybody coming out. Oh, here, let's get a picture. Is that what you want, Bob?
Yeah, well, both of you, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Are we glaring?
Yeah, all of you. Thank you.
All right, I'll hold it for a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna put it with your stuff in the office.
Okay, thank you.
And, like I said, we do thank everyone for coming out on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, thank everybody for listening to me
And thank y'all for driving all the way up from Doniphan to be with us.
Can you tell them about tomorrow?
and
Yeah, tomorrow afternoon, if you're free, we're actually gonna be in Jeff City down by the Historic Jefferson Landing, the Loman Building is a limestone building there down by the Amtrak station. We're going to have 6 blacksmiths demonstrating, including Ray Joe and Keith and Bernie Tackle.
It's like one.
I've been around so many blacksmiths and Bernies the last 3 weeks. Also, Matt Dixon will be there. He's an apprentice this year. And Bob Alexander and his apprentice Lisa Thompson. And they'll be doing live demonstrations from 1 to 4. So come down and join us.
I'd like to say one more thing. I've had, Keith is my 4th apprentice, and I don't want to put any of them down, but Keith is going to be one great gig maker. He's already making some good gigs, but when he gets through, he is going to be, he's going to be top notch. If he keeps at it, that's what it takes, keeping at it.
I'm going to hold it square.
And I would add that Keith mentioned something pretty important. And I think Dr. Tapple would agree. Aren't you the only gig maker that you know about in the Osage area?
Yeah.
Yes. He's a gig maker too, and he makes they fish that really large carp stuff out of those waters. You know, this is very much tied to what you use, and everything is used, local environment of the water. And, but he's the only one that he knows about, and he lives in that area, so he ought to know. I certainly don't know anything else, and there's not much left in his area. In terms of the hand forge, they have some factory job things, but they don't have the...
Yeah, there's a few people that are, doing laser cut,
Yeah,
stuff like that around.
we've got a few in our area to do the, they cut.
Gig makers is a dying art. If it wasn't for the Missouri Folk Art Program and people like Lisa and Debbie, it would be a lost art. Probably by now. I think we ought to give them and the Missouri Folk Art Program